Let me hit record. Okay. Today we are joined by Dr. Aditi Ahlawat and Michael Chapin. And I'll let you two introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself last. So our panelists today are going to share their role at WashU, and then a little bit of a time when they also had a lot of difficulty searching for a job. So Aditi, I'll let you go ahead and start us off.
Thank you, Jordan. Hi, everyone. My name is, as Jordan mentioned, Aditi. I'm one of the staff psychologists at Mental Health Services at Habif Health and Wellness. And my focus has always been in, personal emotional well-being of our students. I've worked in college mental health for almost a decade now. So I will be coming from that lens, looking at kind of how do we manage our anxiety and manage our well-being through the job and career search, career development process. I was an international student who first came to the United States about in 2010, so about 10 years ago. The additional challenges of job search as an international student, applying for internships through, OPT processes, CPT processes. I have been through that system. And, one of the biggest challenge was when I was transferring jobs and transferring my work visa, there was a time lag of about waiting 3 months without a job. And waiting for the immigration process to conclude between job changes, which was new to me. And, my colleagues who were not international students themselves were very supportive. However, they did not personally experience that process. So I think, I appreciated their empathy, but it was a very challenging time. And, of course, with income pressures and family pressures, and you have certain time sensitive things with visa processes, so those have been kind of the challenges, and I try to stay as optimistic and hopeful about the process, because and I can share more about that, why that's important in the process. Otherwise, when your mind spirals to the anxiety of what ifs, then, it's not always helpful for us as well, navigating the process. But those have been kind of my unique challenges in job searches and finding work and applying to jobs. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Michael?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and this great partnership for this program with Jordan and Aditi and Habif. The Career Center itself is excited to work with students always, and certainly when we talk about the topic of job search and certainly anxiety in any kind of time frame, whether we're dealing with COVID or anything else. The challenge of not knowing the future and what the next step or who's out there that's going to accept me is certainly a challenging time for students. And so when we add on COVID and other situations like recessions and economy, there's a lot of things going through students' minds, and it's exciting to be a part of this. So a little bit about my background. I'm actually a career services advisor for WashU for now 17 years. So been fortunate to work with a number of students along the way and through a couple different recessionary times back in 2008, more recently. So we have some good thoughts about some of the tools that you can maybe utilize that will help you as we move forward into this. I specialize a little bit more as a generalist. For a number of years, I worked as an engineering career advisor. I do help students that are interested in consulting careers, but I probably worked with students from all schools, all majors, student athletes, in many regards, first years through graduate master's degree students. We have advisors in our office that have a lot of different professional backgrounds. Me, myself, I have a human resources professional background. I remember coming out from my undergraduate years in a recession, stressing about finding an opportunity, not finding one as a senior. Moving back home to my parents' house felt really challenging at that time of my life. Really questioning what I should do next, where I should go, what type of employer was out there. So really feeling a lot of the things that you're probably feeling now, and certainly helpful to be able to work with you in these types of situations.
Thanks, Michael. And I'll wrap us up with introductions. My name is Jordan Worthington. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as the Assistant Director of Mental Health Outreach and Programming at the Habif Health and Wellness Center. And I am facilitating this conversation. So I work in the health promotion department at Habif, and I didn't always work in health promotion. I didn't always work in mental health, college health. I actually wrapped up my undergrad at the tail end of a recession, similar to Michael, different recession. But I understand the sort of the hopelessness of trying to find a job when it doesn't seem like there's anything there. I graduated from Brown University with a degree in international development. Really wanted to find a job either somewhere abroad or potentially in DC, but honestly couldn't find anything. So I ended up just staying in the town where I went to college for the summer, working, cobbled together several part-time jobs until I found an opportunity that was a step in the direction that I wanted to take. So it wasn't really my ideal job post-graduation, but it did get me closer to where I wanted to be. Eventually to find out that really wasn't the career path that made a lot of sense for me. And that's okay too, right? There's a lot of value in figuring out this isn't really what I want. But it wasn't without taking those risks and trying to take steps closer to where I wanted to be to find out what really was meaningful. So I am curious to hear, a couple of us shared, what is it like to start looking for a job or an internship when they feel really scarce? Michael, I was wondering if you could start out giving us a sense of what does the job and internship market look like right now?
So for the first few months since the end of March, a lot of employers were really challenged with what they should be doing now, trying to hold costs to where they're at. Most of the employers went on hiring freezes. So what that means typically, if an employer is considering bringing people on board, maybe going through an interview process, that they might not necessarily make that ultimate hire at this point in time. What they did tell us too is that anybody that was hired specifically for full-time opportunities, that they wanted to honor those opportunities and not renege or cancel those job offers. So the employers knew it was important to make sure that the students that they did hire, a good majority of them would be still hired. Maybe their start date, instead of sometime after graduation in early May, might be moved back to the midsummer or late summer standpoint, but they did want to honor those. At the same time, for internship opportunities, these are usually during the summer, where a student might work for a particular employer or organization for 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks. Usually those are project-based or where you're not necessarily doing fully integrated work of a full-time employee, but employers value those intern experiences because they help evaluate if this person might be somebody we want to retain in the future after graduation, or to build skills for the student themselves in particular. Unfortunately, we saw about 30 to 35% of those internships get canceled. A number of them, about 20%, actually turned from real experiences or in-person experiences to virtual experiences. And about the remaining half, kept them as is with maybe a reduced timeline as to what they might be doing. So we did see quite a bit of students come back to us in the later part of the spring semester, like with their internships canceled or what they should be doing, or the research experience maybe was delayed. And so that's where we've been advising on quite a bit.
Thanks so much for sharing, Michael. And one of the other things we wanted to talk about with the job and internship market right now is, I was wondering, Aditi, if you could speak to sort of the stress and anxiety that feels pervasive in the kind of the climate around the world of work right now.
Yeah, I mean, similar to, I mean, the processes that Michael was describing, where, you know, you had an internship and then it was canceled, or you know, even the fact that sometimes like in-person internships or in-person opportunities are moving to a virtual format. I think there are new aspects of an experience. It's a terrible first time experience for a lot of people, where there were certain expectations that we had from the world of work that are changing because of the pandemic. And I think that that is bringing up like a lot of new anxieties or tension or sadness around, you know, how things are changing. And so I think that definitely, you know, the whole process of job hunting or applying for positions as you're graduating, as you're wrapping up a phase of your life and transitioning to a new one, that itself is so, like, it has its own stressors. And I think that these additional challenges, these additional barriers from the pandemic have added on. And I think that if we have had other challenges, whether they are financial, familial, visa-related stuff that were already present in our lives, I think that might have exacerbated the way that we're experiencing stress in our life right now. So that is real. And, you know, at the same time, I think that those things are manageable in certain ways, you know, whether that's through mindfulness or whether through other ways of coping and connecting and getting informed, and how to, you know, keep at it, or how to persevere through this process, even when times are changing and situations that we're applying in are changing. So, you know, I want this to be a hopeful message, but at the same time, I also want to say that there are additional barriers and there are additional anxieties that are coming up for people because we are in these new situations. You know, last time I checked, you know, I've never been through a pandemic before. And, you know, you hear about 1918, or you hear about different pandemics and different things in the past, but this is the first time our generation and us as a society are going through this experience, this challenge in our lives. So the way that we respond to it and the way we experience it is also going to be a first time. So, you know, let's work with that. So.
Yeah. So like you said, first time, so many of us have experienced this. And I think it's also probably important to recognize that this is the first time that employers have experienced this as well. So this is the first time at this scale that we've seen so many jobs. Jobs are, hopefully they're honoring them, potentially postponed, but so many internships are being either postponed or canceled. So if we're in that boat, what do we do in the meantime?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, you know, quickly, like I don't have something at my plate, or, you know, something happened to me where mine was canceled or postponed. Suddenly, you know, students feel like, you know, that something is going to be taken off their resume, or that, you know, somebody in the future is going to look at the resume and say, oh, that summer of 2020, you know, because you don't have something there that's going to have negative consequences in their future. And the reality is, as employers, as, you know, students, as anybody that's in this market, this isn't a pandemic just this affects maybe sophomores in the School of Arts and Sciences. This affects every student, every employer, all of us as professionals. It didn't stop at any border. It's affected everybody, and so we're all dealing with it the same. And while it is challenging because it is very personalized when it affects you, where your experience wasn't able to be realized that you had planned or had thought for, that other employers or other opportunities to still be, potentially doing things not only this summer, and we can talk about some of those situational things and what that might look like, but going forward, I think everybody's going to have an understanding and an empathy and hopefully a consideration that what you might have put together for those months will actually benefit you in the future to be able to give you great skills and qualities like perseverance or resilience or maybe a creative mindset or design thinking that will really create value or skills to a future employer that maybe otherwise you might have not had given this time of your life or this experience or this pandemic type of thing. So I think there's really a great way to kind of frame this a lot of ways for those students that have had things canceled or maybe it was delayed in what they thought, or maybe they have more time on their hands to be able to show something unique or research something that maybe they didn't otherwise consider in without having this beneficial time.
So do you think, what do you think about like reaching out to companies still? Maybe your internship was postponed. Are there ways to reach out and still help them even if the official internship was postponed?
So one of the things that I like to say is, when the internships were canceled, whether it would be, in late March or early April, that here we are at the end of May, a month and a half later, most of the peaks of the COVID have passed by the bell curve, so to speak, and companies are trying to turn back online. These companies liked you once, or these organizations wanted to bring you aboard. Well, their number one thing is to keep everybody safe, right? I mean, there's not an employer that is doing this because, that they don't like you anymore. They want to keep their employees safe. They want to keep everybody safe. So while they weren't quick to maybe say, okay, this is what we're going to do with our internship program, what they are maybe saying now is, as we start to come back online, or we start to come back to our offices, or we start to really consider how we're doing our jobs virtually, maybe there are projects, maybe there are work entities. So I would be very inclined to recontact my employer, manager, whoever, or organization contact to say, I know we talked and you didn't have anything for me from a formal standpoint, but is there a chance that I could still help you out this summer? I'd like to work on these skills, whether it's maybe analytics or maybe my writing skills, or these are the things that I think would be very helpful. Could we establish, or we maybe creatively put together a project for a few weeks, whether or not it's for pay or whether or not you call me an intern? That could be something that is kind of negotiated or talked about, but the experience is going to be such that that employer is going to value you for even making that call. That's where some of that resiliency or that perseverance comes in, and maybe there's an opportunity to create something that otherwise maybe prematurely was canceled or whatever.
Yeah, we had talked about how companies still have quite a bit of work to do, and they might not have as many people to do the work, which is why it might be worth it just to reach out to that company or that organization, let them know you still really value them, you want to maintain that contact in the future, and potentially help them. But what if that's not a possibility? What are some other things people might do in that time period when they're waiting for something to start, or maybe a formal internship experience doesn't materialize quickly over the summer. Like, what are some other opportunities that people might consider to build those skills for future opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's great to be able to kind of put together an inventory of maybe what my personal skills are right now, or maybe what interesting things would I like to be involved with, or set together what value systems that maybe is important to them in an organization, or in what types of steps that they want to make in their future. So I think this personal reflection, maybe skills development, maybe giving a chance to do some sort of further, counseling or advising with a career center advisor, somebody that's important in their lives, maybe professional, some informational interviewing. These are things that you can start to explore and expand upon my own personal areas. And then what things that I might like to do could come out from what are other people doing in the fields that I'd like to get involved with, what are recent graduates maybe doing in their workplaces now in a particular industry. For example, I work in the consulting industry with a lot of students interested in that. What does that mean? Is there a chance for me to maybe do some networking or some informational interviewing, maybe build some skills, whether it's working in modeling or statistics or things that I might not otherwise have right now. I could do some online courses. Maybe I do have skills. Maybe I have great writing skills, and I could do some social media blogging for a particular organization, maybe a nonprofit that really has no idea what to do with that. And because I ran something for my student organization on WashU's campus, that would allow me to develop that much larger, or much to a different community that might otherwise not have received something like that. So I think there's a lot of possibilities if students want to try to move beyond what maybe is in an internship job board or internship listing, that when I start to click into some of these job boards and look for something very specific that says internship opening and there's not much there, then I have to start to think, well, there must be nobody hiring. But the reality is that the students are able to kind of get creative about what they can do or what they'd like to do, and start to proactively engage and reach out to people maybe doing that, organizations that might be interested in that. That's where I think a lot of recruiting is happening in the early part of this this summer season right now.
Typing a few more notes. There's one other resource we had talked about that, Michael, I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about, and that is Parker Dewey, which is something that I think might be a resource that could be really valuable, especially to our undergrads who are here.
Yeah, so Parker Dewey and another website called Gig Now are two sites, and particularly that are project-based organizational work. So if I'm a for-profit or nonprofit organization, and I maybe not necessarily have a 12-week internship program, but I might have a student that is really strong at, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, maybe some writing skills, or maybe some analytics, or maybe some sort of customer engagement or marketing creation or something like that. Students can build their accounts on Parker Dewey using their @wusel.edu email address, and they have a series called Career Launcher projects. They're very competitive, but at the same time, many of these organizations are willing to pay for these projects, and they could be 3 weeks long, 6 weeks, a month, whatever the time frame becomes, and you virtually are able to complete those. So we have a number of them as far as the virtual or freelance project work. If you go to our Career Center website, which is students.washu.edu, or excuse me, students.wusel.edu, slash careers, you're going to find a box right at the top of that page. Talk about what summer experiences can I do in summer 2020. And if you scroll down that page, we have links for many different organizations. And one of them is Consider Virtual Freelance or Project Work. And they have links to both Parker Dewey and Gig Now and how to really navigate some of those sites.
And those are often paid?
Those organizations are often paid.
Okay. Not all, but some.
Not everyone. And so some of the individual projects that, you could maybe be creative. If you don't see something that you qualify for, but you have skills in another area, a lot of organizations, for example, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, whether you're a for-profit or nonprofit, but the nonprofit world, where they might not do a lot of college campus recruiting, but they have professional positions in many areas, communications, public relations, development work, building folks to kind of help support what they're doing, trying to get their word out. All these things are very needed skills where you can build that for your resume. So a site like idealist.org that has thousands and thousands of organizations listed by geographical area all over the world. Yes, they have a tab for internships and jobs, but if I look just by organizations, maybe I can do some proactive outreach to who that contact source is on, that particular organizations, because they match my interest, or maybe the area of the world that I'm in. I'm like, hey, I'm really excited about what you do as an organization. Can we talk about some of the things that you're working on? Do you need help in anything? And oh, by the way, I have 6 or 8 hours, or 6 or 8 weeks this summer, or maybe 30 hours a week, or even 10 hours a week, or whatever the time frame becomes. Could this be a possibility for us to put together a project that I could be able to have some guidance in, but I'll offer you a deliverable and maybe a recommendation at the end of my project that I could use for my resume or for my future recruiting practices.
Cool. Personal side note, I spent a very weird summer in northeastern Thailand off of an opportunity that I found on Idealist over a decade ago. So you can find things on Idealist. So what if we're just starting this job and internship search? What if we don't have a lot of work experience, and what if we're feeling kind of nervous reaching out to employers because there might not be something formal listed on their websites, or we're not sure if they're even looking for help?
Yeah, and I think being able to take somebody that says I want to build my resume, as opposed to here's my resume and look at all the wonderful things about me. One of the best things about your resume is the fact that you go to Washington University on the very top of your education section. And, just by what you're considering as a major or already, established as your major, should give you some talking points as to who somebody that is a professional in a particular world. So maybe it's finding another alumni on LinkedIn or on the alumni.wustel.edu website, where you can see different communities that our alumni work in and all the different cities where they have different groups connected by LinkedIn. I think doing informational interviews or being able to kind of reach out and say, as a student, I'm interested in this field, but I have no idea what that's about. Could you set up, 10 minutes, 15 minutes with me this week to start answering some questions that I might have about that? I'd be very excited to learn more. And because you have a good common denominator with who they are, what they do, that should give you some good talking points to be able to kind of be considered for that starting point.
Yeah. So even if you're just starting out, even if you've just wrapped up your first year of college, I will say that I think that people's schedules are, if you're working remotely, they tend to be a lot more flexible now. And it can get maybe not as exciting because you don't get to be among your colleagues all the time. And people love being treated like an expert in something. So if you approach them with that sort of mindset, I really want to learn from you, people feel very flattered. So more likely than not, people feel such affinities for where they went to school. And so they would be really honored and excited if you reached out to them. And it could probably be the highlight of their day or their week. So it can feel really self-conscious being the one reaching out to someone, but they're probably really excited to talk with you. But speaking of the opposite of excitement, this is the Job Search Stress and Anxiety Workshop. What should we do if we're feeling super overwhelmed by all of this? We're having a hard time getting started, or we're feeling really unmotivated. Many of us are feeling sort of symptoms of depression with the sort of all these changes that are happening in our lives. So Aditi, I was wondering if you could talk about, what do we do if this feels like too much right now?
So, if this does feel like too much, or we are experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression, or just, restlessness that's beyond, something that we've experienced before. I also recommend reaching out to us at Mental Health Services. I know that all students who've graduated this May are eligible for our services until July 31st, 2020. And if you're not physically in St. Louis or in Missouri, we're still offering check-ins and referrals and trying to connect you with as many, mental health resources and support and psychotherapy, or, if folks are interested in talking to psychiatrists for medication, all of those options are available to you if that is a need. And I'm a big believer of destigmatizing mental health services. So, I've been in therapy before. Part of the reason why I became a therapist was because I've really benefited from it. And it really motivated me to reach out. And especially in times like, these where the transition is so beyond what the normal system and normal processes of life we're used to. So, I think that I hope that there is no shame or hesitance in people in wanting to reach out and connect. And I really think that, when it is more specific concerns, whether it is, anxiety about applying to jobs, or, if we have specific challenges in our life that we just want a space to process our feelings about, or get support or work through, whether financial, and that way I want to acknowledge that, we could have some unique challenges that we want to deliberate more on. And that those are areas that, whether it is through career advisement or through counseling, that we can get more down to, creatively looking at those things. Because, sometimes we can get in our own head when we are anxious about, the worst possible scenario, or, feel really hard when it's hard just to get out of bed, and you're asking me to apply to these jobs. What are you talking about? So please connect to us, or we'll help you get connected to whoever's in, wherever you are, to provide you that support. This is not something that we, want you to feel like you're all by yourself trying to figure out and navigate all of this. We're here, and we're here for a reason. And we want you to feel like you can come and talk to us about these things. And if we don't have the answers, we will also try to make sure we connect you with people, who are experts, or, look at your unique situation and connect you with others who might be able to address the problems or address the situations that you're in. I can offer information more specifically about international students' experiences, and how to navigate that process. And my colleagues or folks who know certain areas, you know, like Michael was talking about engineering advisement. And so there are people out there who can help you get more information and also help you find skills and ways to navigate that stress or that depression, whether it's medication, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's talk therapy. So I invite you to check in at the least if these are some concerns you're experiencing.
I mean, it goes probably without saying it, Didi, but I mean, for me, this just making sure that I'm able to, you know, be balanced with my nutrition and sleep, and you know, try to get some exercise a couple times a week to kind of reduce that stress. All those things that are, you know, seem so basic, but when we look at screens and see the news and try to, you know, really, it builds up a lot. And so trying to get away from that and understand that, you know, there are things we can't control out there, and maybe trying to think about what we can control might be our perceptions, and building positive perceptions. Jordan kind of talked about that optimism a little bit earlier. I can't say enough. When we think about, you know, when we talk to students a lot, you know, I think being able to say what you can offer as opposed to what I don't have to an employer is one thing. Being proud of the fact that you're a WashU student and you have multiple tools beyond knowledge to be able to share and have a good, you know, feeling about that. That's going to be really positive as you look to get past, you know, this pandemic, or, you know, the last recession that students, I remember where students were, we used a word called frozen, and if any of the students around this kind of feel stuck or frozen right now, you know, that's maybe something where you want to try to, you know, literally unfreeze by taking small action steps, by having a conversation with an advisor, or somebody that is a mentor, or finding a mentor in your life to try to, you know, work off some of this stress, by not building it up, by allowing yourself some freedoms to be able to say, it's okay, and I'm just going to continue to push ahead and try to move forward, as opposed to stay stuck, so to speak.
Yeah. I cannot, you know, thanks for pointing that out, Michael. I cannot emphasize the value of having a routine and a system in place when everything else, you know, seems unpredictable. So, you know, a lot of us are experiencing this coronavirus pandemic, or are if we are in transitions between, you know, finishing up college or grad school and moving on to applying for jobs. These are significant transitions. And so there are external stressors because of these transitions, because of the pandemic, because of political things happening around us that we are, you know, constantly exposed to. So grounding ourselves in certain routine things, no matter how boring or, you know, lame they might be, having those things in place actually will sustain us in ways that, you know, will help our, you know, what in neurobiology talk about, you know, the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and restorative response to stressors. So things that can activate that part of our, you know, our innate response, innate ability to take care of ourselves. Those things are, you know, as you're going through this, you know, find one or two things in your routine that you can do to help you build a routine, to help you stay more grounded. You know, mindfulness is one way, exercise is one way, you know, if reducing caffeine and sugar intakes after a certain point of the day is one way. So finding those things and finding ways in which, you know, these things work for you is, you know, definitely something worth focusing on. I know I'm doing it. I know we all are in our own ways trying to find that routine or, you know, regimen that we can follow during these times to manage our stress too. So, yeah.
And I like that you said find find one or two ways, because I think oftentimes when people tell us like, oh, you need to take care of yourself, you need to have a routine, it's like we're telling everyone like, all right, like everyone has to be an Instagram wellness influencer now, which is not the case. It's honestly like those lifestyles are often quite unhealthy in their own ways, but it's not realistic for us to like flip a switch and then become like this pinnacle of health, right? So just find a couple of ways of things that work for you, right? And so let them be easy. Like don't pick something that you feel like you can achieve. Let it be small. So maybe it's like going to bed 15 minutes earlier today. And then kind of build up over time rather than like flipping a switch and changing your lifestyle entirely if it's something that your current lifestyle isn't necessarily working for your kind of overall well-being. But start small. And same way when you're thinking about this process of looking for opportunities, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to email 20 different people today with 20 different specific questions and asks, and I'm going to have 50 informational interviews set up by the end of next week. Like, no, maybe like by the end of this week, you send out 5 emails or write down a list of 3 companies that you want to research their websites a little more. But start small and then build up your confidence. I think when you dip your toes into the water, then you can kind of build up over time rather than putting so much pressure on yourself to do everything immediately, if that makes sense. Yeah, but what if like our anxiety feels really high while we're waiting for all of this stuff? Aditi, I don't know if you had any further thoughts on that.
I think if the anxiety is beyond manageable, like, we sit in front of the computer or we can't fall asleep, if you're having significant sleep difficulties that you can't eat, and it's not just a day, but most days, then, 5 out of 7 days in a week or 3 to 5 days in a week where this, you can't sleep well, you can't eat, or, your muscle tension, you're experiencing a lot of physical symptoms of the stress, or, it's hard to focus or concentrate. These are just symptoms that probably then, reaching out to a professional to talk a little bit more in depth about how do you address these symptoms, whether, we have options between medication, therapy, workshops, skills, things that you can do. And these are all stepped responses to the degree of, or the intensity of the anxiety or mood changes or physical symptoms that we have. So not a bad idea to reach out in those moments to get to understand yourself and your symptoms a little more, little more in depth. And therapy can definitely be an option to use to explore some of those symptoms. So, that's my first response to that.
Yeah, thank you. We had one last question kind of gathered from what we had talked about, from the questions that people had asked us, and we addressed it. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning of our workshop, but one of the questions was, will a gap on my resume hurt me? And will it potentially hurt if maybe the opportunities that I'm seeking right now don't necessarily look related to the career I'm looking to get into? And then we wanted to talk a little bit about using this time to explore fit with potential employers. And Michael or Aditi, I don't know if you had thoughts on that.
I do. I think this time, again, is, I kind of briefed over it earlier. I think it's a time where everybody's going to look at this, whatever, March through September, or whatever this summer becomes for people. And if somebody, doesn't have an employer or a research position and the date and the time, in their work experience or their, interest areas on their resume, it isn't necessarily going to be looked at like that's the worst thing. But the question employers will have, or anybody will have when they evaluate us, is not what didn't you do, but what did you do instead? And I think that's some of the creativeness of maybe being able to kind of put together, whether it's your own, research of kind of things that you'd like to do. A student asked me the other day or last week in an advising appointment, is it okay if I go backpacking for a month and a half? And I said, sure, it's absolutely okay. And he goes, well, how will the employers will view that? I says, well, tell them what you took from your backpacking experience that helped build whatever better mindfulness for you, or that you were able to apply those things that you learned and maybe educated a youth program or a Boy Scout troop or something about some of the things that you gathered. It's not what we do, but it's what we do with it. Obviously, students learn great material every week in their courses from the professors, and they build this knowledge. It's not only do we acquire it, but now what do we do with it? And that's that experience side of your resume that employers or people looking at it say, okay, how did you apply your knowledge or your experience towards something that I can benefit from in the future? And I think more often than not, it's what I can do in this summer that I can apply something towards, whether it's providing a service, whether it's building upon an idea. Maybe I want to grow intellectually in a field, in an area. And as long as I have a story that I can say what I built or what I grew or how I spent the time productively, I think that's going to be a real strong response from the employer to say, I like that.
And I think the other side of the story that is also something to think about perhaps is, when we're talking about fit, yes, it is good to present our best selves and, demonstrate our skills to the folks that are exploring whether, you as an applicant are a good fit for them. But I think this is also a time perhaps to contemplate on your own values and your beliefs and is this a good fit for me as someone who wants to work for this company or this organization? I ask if you say have a gap of 3 months or, I use an extreme example, but a really good friend of mine had a terminal illness, or not a terminal illness, but an acute illness for about 3 months of time where she had to take time off from work or was between job applications and just, couldn't apply at the same time as the rest of her friends. And going back into the job market, something that she wanted to consider was how would that be received? And, the thing to consider is hey, do I want to work for a company that takes this time or, whatever extenuating circumstances or whatever our personal challenges might be into account is also something important to consider, I want reciprocity in that. I want to present my best self, but I also want them to provide me the best support or provide me the best opportunities, knowing who I am. So I think one of the things I ask people to do is explore your own values and to use this time to see, I've been having a lot of conversations with international clients, international students who are exploring, creative ways to apply here in the United States. The big fear was, hey, if I go back to my home country, is that, the end of my career, the end of, all the hopes or all the things that I ascribe to, an American education or experience? No, it's not, and so finding ways to apply and finding ways to, there are opportunities that are still open to you, even if you have to go home or even if, let's find some creative ways to answer those questions. If we get stuck in, oh my God, I only had 3 months and this is, was the worst thing, that, I don't know what helpful would come out of that kind of, that particular situation. yeah, without getting too specific, I just want to say that, like, let's explore that, and let's explore how our values also align with the people who we are applying to, or the organizations that we're seeking jobs from as well. So
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure that Michael and Aditi, we've all worked at places that maybe didn't have values that fit what our own personal values are, and it can be extremely detrimental in the long run. So figuring out what those are and finding places that value your humanity and who you are as a person, if that's something that you value and that's something you want out of an employer, can be super important. We did promise a little bit of time for Q&A. So if people do have questions you'd like us to talk about, you can either send me a private message if you don't want your question asked in front of everyone, or you can share with the group. But we'd love to be able to answer a few of your questions before we wrap up today. And while we wait for questions to come in from the chat box, good time to plug, if you want to explore more, making an appointment with the Career Center. Michael shared a link in the chat. And also, if you're like, hey, this is bringing up a lot of questions on how I'm dealing with all of this, there's also an option to make an appointment or talk with someone at Mental Health Services. The number is a little bit further up there. I don't know, anything else, Michael or Aditi, you'd like to share? If we wait for any more questions to come in.
I put another big plug in for another tool called LinkedIn Learning. It's everybody's in the WashU community has a free account to that. Video tutorials covering many different topics and skills and knowledge, and it's terrifically put together for free. I can't emphasize enough. If you've ever wanted to know something about something, this is a perfect time where, you know, maybe you have some time available where you can do it virtually and build some knowledge or some core areas, and again, add to that strength of what'd you do this summer. I spent, 10 hours a week learning this function, and here's how I put it together and what I think I can bring you in the future.
All right, so we have a couple questions.
Good.
Are you ready?
Sure.
So as I've dealt with this myself for many years after I graduated college. How do we balance what our parents' expectations of what our jobs should look like versus our own expectations?
I think our parents want the best for us in any situation. They want us to be happy, very functioning citizens in this world, and whether that means work in a particular type of organization with a particular type of title, with a particular level of salary, the idea is that maybe, they don't have to worry about us as much if we're doing okay. Investing in your future, investing into Washington University, investing into this degree, investing into your experiences. Yes, everybody wants you to be successful, no matter you, yourself, or your parents. And sometimes that time frame is a little bit different. Your parents, your expectations, where you want to land. So I think you're all working towards the same goal. And I recommend just having a good conversation with them, so that your understanding of what that time frame and what you're working towards matches, and that you can work actually together towards something, even though it's obviously your situation, not theirs. They just want the best for you.
I think I agree with what Michael says too. And I think that, sometimes with communication, all parties in communication have to be mindful of like different approaches and experiences that we're all coming to that conversation from. Your experience at WashU might be different from your parents' experience with their university, from what job expectations and kind of messages around job search, job career identity that their generation and their experiences came with. So those differences can sometimes come up in these conversations, and um, I often say that we have to be mindful of our own experience, our own emotions, and our own responses in those moments, and acknowledge and have flexibility with each other in that process when you are talking about those things, because it's important to acknowledge that they might have something meaningful to say to us, and they're coming from their own experiences with that. So productive can come out of that is helpful to focus on that, because otherwise it turns into like, oh, I want this, but you want this from me, and you don't understand. And sometimes people don't understand, but understanding can be reached when we are being thoughtful in that moment about our feelings and our thoughts. And all I can say is I can work with myself in that moment, and what I'm sharing and how I'm expressing my feelings, or how I'm expressing my experiences with people. So
yeah. A lot of it is finding common ground. Like, yes, mom and dad, we both want me to find a job. Like, I want that for myself too. And it looks really different right now than what the world of work looked like when your parents were in college, and they probably didn't have to do it in a pandemic either. So, giving yourself credit, but also finding that common ground and then working from there. Do you have any suggestions for students who might be finding themselves in smaller towns? They might have, applied for internships or jobs in larger cities, didn't work out. Now is a tough time to relocate. So any thoughts on like smaller locations, or what comes to mind right now is finding virtual opportunities?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to, rural versus urban, or smaller population versus large, just a number of employers, the same skills might be realized, whether it's in a larger populace versus a smaller, just maybe who offers that, or the projects you could do maybe are a little bit more localized. But maybe that offers some advantages where more people can help you network to find what those projects might be in a smaller area than maybe a larger, where there's not as many connections, so to speak. More often than not, I think a lot of that would be is, if you're concerned about it, reach out to a career advisor, set up an appointment. We can talk about what that might look like individually, where that's from. Maybe there are alums that are in those areas still or not, or maybe some ideas for doing things virtually that would, support you that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, cool. We have one more question. It's a little more vague, but any specific advice for students who might be in Sam Fox School? I know we have several people from Sam Fox who are looking for opportunities. Any thoughts on students who might be working in the fields of design, art, architecture?
I think when you think about art and architecture and design, I mean, the portfolio is what is bigger than the resume almost, and being able to kind of show your work and being able to kind of put it in the hands of folks that want to help you and obviously critique you and allow you to kind of grow as an artist, as a designer, as a builder. So I think it's important to kind of, look at some of the faculty, some of the advisors. My colleagues, Martine Padilla specializes in architecture students. Jennifer Meyer, she specializes students in Sam Fox School of Art and Design. I would set up appointments with them, talk about those types of things, continue to build those strengths on whatever medium that you are. If you're not able to be in studio because of the pandemic, what can you do towards that the creative sense that you have? And those folks can kind of help direct you a little bit better, specifically in the areas that because there's a lot of people that want to help you in that regard.
I think in my own experience of working with students, I've worked with some students who graduated from the San Fox School, and one of the things that they talked about, and this is just anecdotal, you know, but they talked about was how to build their online presence with their portfolio. Like they had the physical portfolio and physical projects and things that they've worked on, and then how to highlight it on a website or online is something that some of them have been working on as they're applying for jobs after graduation. So if, you know, if you're working on that right now, or that is a project you could do, how do you transfer, you know, like high definition photos and, you know, artwork and things on an online medium to showcase some of the work that you're doing on, you know, through an online presence. So just, you know, something that I heard folks were working on, and I thought it was very cool.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Aditi. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We have recorded the workshop, so we're hoping to find a place to let this live online. And we hope that this at least inspires you to figure out what your values are, figure out perhaps more opportunities that might have sort of like light bulbs that might have come on in your head as we talked about this. And then, you know, leveraging that alumni network, setting up an appointment with a career counselor who specializes in the field that you're interested in, perhaps reaching out to someone in mental health services or a mentor, someone who can help you sort this out maybe on a more personal level. We wish you the best of luck as you continue to navigate this summer, whatever it might look like. And then I hope that one other thing that you took away from the conversation was the importance of sort of crafting your own personal narrative around the time that you spent and making meaning out of it. You know, whatever it does look like for you, as I don't know about Michael and Aditi, but as someone with pretty significant gaps in my own resume, being able to tell those stories with sort of with confidence, but also humility might end up making you a more employable person later on, because people really want people who want to work with people who can tell their stories and can and seem like real humans that will be future good colleagues and coworkers. So with that, we will sign off. Please feel free to get in touch. You can always send me an email at jworthington@woostel.edu. And we wish you the best of luck. Thank you, everyone.